Entrepreneur and politician Donald Trump served as the 45th President of the United States and won re-election in 2024. He will become the nation's 47th president in January 2025. Prior to his political career, the real estate developer took over his father's middle-income housing business and transformed it into a global luxury brand that now includes hotels, golf courses, and commercial properties. Trump became a best-selling author with his 1987 book The Art of the Deal and a reality TV star in the 2000s on The Apprentice. Despite his underdog status, Trump was elected president in November 2016, served one term from 2017 to 2021, then lost his re-election bid in 2020. The subject of numerous personal, business, and political scandals, Trump was convicted of falsifying business records in May 2024 and faces an additional criminal trial regarding election interference in Georgia, to which he has pleaded not guilty. Donald John Trump was born on June 14, 1946, in the New York City borough of Queens. He was the fourth of 5 children to parents Frederick Christ Trump Sr. and Mary Trump. Fred Sr., Donald's father, was also born and raised in New York City. His parents were German immigrants, though he claimed Swedish ancestry for decades after World War II. Fred Sr. cut his teeth as a real estate developer while still a teenager and later specialized in constructing and operating middle-income apartments in Queens and nearby Brooklyn. In 1930, Donald's mother left her home in Tong, Scotland, for the United States as a 17-year-old named Mary Ann MacLeod. Soon after, she met Fred Sr., who was about 7 years her senior. The couple married in 1936 and settled in Queens' Jamaica neighborhood that was, at the time, filled with Western European immigrants. Mary became an American citizen in 1942. As the family's wealth increased in the 1950s thanks to the post-war real estate boom, she became a philanthropist. Donald grew up with 2 older sisters, an older brother, and a younger brother, Mary Ann Trump Berry, born in April 1937. Was a federal judge for 36 years, eventually serving as a senior judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. She took an inactive status soon after her brother became president, then retired from the bench in February 2019 amid a judicial investigation into the Trump family's tax practices that ended upon her retirement. Mary Ann died at age 86 in November 2023. Fred Trump Jr., born in 1938 and known as Freddie, reluctantly joined his father's real estate company, but his true passion was aviation. He left the family business for a time to become a TWA pilot before returning to real estate. Freddie's struggle with alcoholism eventually led to his early death in 1981 at age 43, prompting Donald's choice to abstain from alcohol, cigarettes, and drugs. Elizabeth Trump Grau, born in 1942, is a retired banker who is married to film producer James Grau. Robert Trump, born in August 1948, was Donald's younger brother who spent much of his career working for the family company. He died in August 2020, aged 71. Thanks to his father's business success, Donald enjoyed a life of luxury from a young age. Yet, the Trump children were also beholden to strict rules. Whereas Donald's father was the hard-driving disciplinarian, His mother set the tone for his religious education. My religious values were instilled in me by my mother. Donald wrote in his book Great Again. He was raised Presbyterian and later attended Marble Collegiate Church, a Protestant house of worship led by Reverend Norman Vincent Peale at the time, and the Church of Bethesda by the Sea, an Episcopal congregation in Florida. Today, he identifies as a non-denominational Christian. Trump took his first presidential oath of office with a Bible his mother had given him in 1955 when he graduated Sunday school. Trump was known to test boundaries as a child, acknowledging this tendency in his book The Art of the Deal. Even in elementary school, I was a very assertive, aggressive kid. He later described himself as a bit of a troublemaker. At age 13, Trump's parents sent him to the New York Military Academy in upstate New York, hoping the discipline of the school would channel his energy in a positive manner. He did well at the academy, both socially and academically, rising to become a star athlete and student leader by the time he graduated in 1964. Later that year, Trump entered Fordham University. He transferred to the Wharton School of Finance at the University of Pennsylvania after 2 years and graduated in 1968 with a degree in economics. During his years at college, Trump worked at his father's real estate business during the summer. He also secured education deferments for the draft for the Vietnam War and, ultimately, a 1Y medical deferment after he graduated. After college, Trump followed his father into a career in real estate development and brought his grander ambitions to the family business. He took over the company in 1971, renamed it the Trump Organization 2 years later, and expanded the business conglomerate's geographic footprint and overall scope to include hotels, golf courses, commercial properties, and more. One of the most well-known businessmen in America by the 80s, Trump capitalized on his reputation to become a best-selling author and reality TV star on The Apprentice and its spin-off, Celebrity Apprentice. He was part owner of the Miss USA, Miss Teen USA, and Miss Universe beauty pageants from 1996 to 2015. When Trump became the President of the United States in January 2017, he relinquished management of the Trump Organization to his sons Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump. Under Donald's leadership, the Trump Organization began expanding into Manhattan real estate in the early 1970s. His first major commercial project was rehabbing the old Commodore Hotel into the Grand Hyatt Hotel and restoring the exterior of neighboring Grand Central Station. To complete the project, Trump secured a 40-year property tax abatement deal, the first such agreement New York City made on a commercial property. A flurry of additional high-profile projects followed in the decade after the Grand Hyatt's 1980 opening. Trump Tower, completed in 1983, combines luxury retail, residential, and office space. Trump Place, now owned by a Chicago-based company, replaced the West Side rail yards with 16 high-end residential buildings. The developer began renovations on the famous Plaza Hotel after purchasing it in 1988. He sold it 4 years later. Outside of New York City, Trump expanded his company's holdings into casinos via the Trump Plaza, Trump's Castle, later renamed Trump Marina, and Trump Taj Mahal, all located in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Ultimately, The Trump Organization exited the casino business. Trump's other business ventures over the years have included golf courses in 10 American cities and 5 foreign countries, such as Trump International Golf Club, the Mar-a-Lago Club, his personal estate turned private club in Palm Beach, Florida, Trump University, a for-profit seminar series about real estate, an air shuttle service, the New Jersey Generals, a team in the U.S. Football League, and numerous licensing deals of the Trump name. For all his successes, Trump has also experienced his share of failures. He has declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy to reorganize his business debt 6 times between 1991 and 2009. 4 of the filings covered casinos the Trump Organization owned. In January 2004, Trump became the star and an executive producer of The Apprentice, a reality competition show on NBC. Contestants vied for the chance to work for Trump, who became synonymous with his dismissal catchphrase, "You're fired," an immediate success. The Apprentice's first season drew more than 20 million weekly viewers and earned an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Reality Competition Program. In total, the Apprentice franchise garnered 9 Emmy nods. Though it never won, the series launched a spin-off, Celebrity Apprentice, in early 2008 that featured singer Meat Loaf, actor George Takei, and boxer Layla Ali among its many contestants who raised money for charity. Trump left the show in 2015, shortly after announcing his first presidential campaign, though he remained a producer for a follow-up season hosted by Arnold Schwarzenegger. In October 1973, the federal government filed a complaint against Trump, his father, and their rental management company, alleging that they had discriminated against tenants and potential tenants based on their race, a violation of the Fair Housing Act, which is part of the 1968 Civil Rights Act. The Trumps denied the claims and, after a lengthy legal battle, settled the case in June 1975 without admitting fault. As part of the settlement, the company had to train employees about the Fair Housing Act, inform the community about its fair housing practices, and devote some advertising of its rental vacancies to Black and Puerto Rican communities for a period of 2 years. It was also required to share race-based data of its renters and applicants in 16 buildings for a 2-year period. In 2005, Trump launched his for-profit Trump University, offering classes in real estate and acquiring and managing wealth. The venture had been under scrutiny almost since its inception, and at the time of his 2015 presidential bid, it remained the subject of multiple lawsuits. In the cases, claimants accused Trump of fraud, false advertising, and breach of contract. Controversy about the suits made headlines when Trump suggested that U.S. District Court Judge Gonzalo Curiel could not be impartial in overseeing 2 class action cases because of his Mexican heritage. On November 18, 2016, Trump, who had previously vowed to take the matter to trial, settled 3 of the lawsuits for $25 million without admission of liability. In a statement from New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, he called the settlement a stunning reversal by Trump and a major victory for the over 6,000 victims of his fraudulent university. Later, in a separate incident related to Trump University, it was reported that Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi decided not to join the existing New York fraud lawsuit. This came just days after she had received a sizable campaign donation from the Donald J. Trump Foundation, which was founded in 1988 as a private charity organization designed to make donations to nonprofit groups. In November 2016, it was reported that Bondi's name was on Trump's list as a possible U.S. Attorney General contender. As a result of the improper donation to Bondi's campaign, Trump was required to pay the IRS a penalty, and his foundation came under scrutiny about the use of its funds for non-charitable activities. According to tax records, the Trump Foundation itself was found to have received no charitable gifts from Trump since 2008, and that all donations since that time had come from outside contributors. In fall 2019, after Trump admitted to misusing money raised by his foundation to promote his presidential campaign and settle debts, he was ordered to pay $2 million in damages, and the foundation was forced to shutter its doors. Over the years, Trump's net worth have been a subject of public debate because Trump has not publicly released his tax returns. It's not possible to definitively determine his wealth in the past or today. However, Trump valued his businesses at least $1.37 billion on his 2017 federal financial disclosure form, published by the Office of Government Ethics. Trump's 2018 disclosure form put his revenue for the year at a minimum of $434 million from all sources. In 1990, Trump asserted his own net worth in the neighborhood of $1.5 billion. At the time, the real estate market was in decline, reducing the value of and income from Trump's empire. The Trump Organization required a massive infusion of loans to keep it from collapsing, a situation that raised questions as to whether the corporation could survive bankruptcy. Some observers saw Trump's decline as symbolic of many of the business, economic and social excesses that had arisen in the 1980s. A May 2019 investigation by the New York Times of 10 years of Trump's tax information found that between 1985 and 1994, his businesses lost money every year. The newspaper calculated that Trump's businesses suffered $1.17 billion in losses over the decade. Trump later defended himself on Twitter, calling the Times report a highly inaccurate fake news hit job. He tweeted that he reported losses for tax purposes, and that doing so was a sport among real estate developers. Donald Trump has been married to Melania Trump, his third wife, for nearly 20 years. His ex-wives include the late Ivana Trump and Marla Maples. Both marriages ended in divorce. The entrepreneur and politician is a father to 3 sons and 2 daughters. In 1977, Trump married his first wife, Ivana Trump, a New York fashion model who had been an alternate on the 1972 Czech Olympic ski team. She was named vice president in charge of design in the Trump Organization and played a major role in supervising the renovation of the Commodore and the Plaza Hotel in New York City. The couple had 3 children together: Donald Trump Jr., Ivanka, and Eric. Ivana and Donald Sr. went through a highly publicized divorce that was finalized in 1992. In 1993, Trump married his second wife, Marla Maples, an actor with whom he had been involved for some time and already had a daughter, Tiffany. Trump ultimately filed for divorce from Maples in 1997, widely covered by media outlets. Their split was finalized in June 1999. A prenuptial agreement allotted $2 million to Maples. Trump is currently married to former Slovenian model Melania Trump, who is more than 23 years his junior. In January 2005, the couple wed in a highly publicized and lavish wedding. Among the many celebrity guests at the wedding were Hillary Clinton and former President Bill Clinton. A year later, Donald and Melania welcomed their son, Barron. Trump has 5 children. He and his first wife, Ivana, had 3 kids together. Donald Trump Jr., born in December 1977, Ivanka Trump, born in October 1981, and Eric Trump, born in January 1984. Donald and his second wife, Marla, had daughter Tiffany Trump in October 1993. His current wife, Melania, gave birth to Donald's youngest child, Barron Trump, in March 2006. Trump's sons Donald Jr. and Eric work as executive vice presidents for the Trump Organization. Donald Jr. joined the family business in 2001, followed by younger brother Eric 6 years later. In early 2017, the brothers took on their current leadership positions in the Trump Organization as their father began serving as president. Trump's daughter Ivanka was also an executive vice president of the Trump Organization, having joined the business in 2005. Elsewhere, she worked with her dad on The Apprentice and became an entrepreneur with the creation of her eponymous fashion label. In 2017, Ivanka left the Trump Organization and her fashion brand, which closed a year later, to join her father's presidential administration as an unpaid advisor. Her husband, Jared Kushner, similarly served as a senior advisor to President Trump. Since the end of Donald's presidential term in 2021, Ivanka and her husband have been much less involved in politics. However, Donald Jr. and Eric have increasingly contributed to their father's political ambitions and are honorary chairs of his 2024 transition team. Eric's wife, Laura Trump, is also a prominent Republican leader. She has served as co-chair of the Republican National Committee since March 2024, but announced in December she is stepping down. Tiffany Trump largely grew up with her mother in Southern California, but maintained ties to her half-siblings and father. She attended Donald's alma mater, University of Pennsylvania, for her undergraduate education before graduating from Georgetown University's law school in 2020. She is expecting her first child with husband Michael Boulos. Barron was the only one of Donald's 5 children to live at the White House. He was 10 years old when his dad became president and moved to Washington, D.C. in the summer of 2017 after completing the school year at his former New York City prep school. Now an adult, Barron is a student at New York University. In addition to his 5 children, the former president is also a grandfather. He has 10 grandchildren with another one on the way. For Apprentice fans and many others, Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign seemingly came out of nowhere. However, the business leader had shown an interest in politics decades earlier and even explored running for president on the Reform Party ticket in 2000. He decided against entering the race as candidate Pat Buchanan drummed up support among the third party's base. A decade and a half later, Trump became one of the most recognizable politicians in the world. Trump, a registered Republican, has done more to reshape his political party than anyone else in the past decade. He hasn't always been a member of the GOP, though. In 1987, Trump registered as a Republican before becoming an independent 2 years later. By 2000, the business leader was part of the Reform Party, which famously backed fellow entrepreneur Ross Perot's presidential campaigns in the 1990s. In 2001, Trump registered as a Democrat. By 2009, Trump had switched back to the Republican Party, though he registered as an independent in 2011 to allow for a potential run in the following year's presidential election. He again returned to the Republican Party to endorse Mitt Romney's 2012 presidential campaign and has remained a Republican since. Since his first ascension to the presidency in 2017, Trump has ushered in a more populist, more conservative identity to the Republican Party. His hardline stance on immigration and America First ethos have been particularly well received among voters. Many moderate Republicans in Congress and in other elected positions have lost primary races for not backing Trumpism. Even after the former president's term concluded in early 2021, by 2009, Trump had switched back to the Republican Party, though he registered as an independent in 2011 to allow for a potential run in the following year's presidential election. He again returned to the Republican Party to endorse Mitt Romney's 2012 presidential campaign and has remained a Republican since. Since his first ascension to the presidency in 2017, Trump has ushered in a more populist, more conservative identity to the Republican Party. His hardline stance on immigration and America First ethos have been particularly well received among voters. Many moderate Republicans in Congress and in other elected positions have lost primary races for not backing Trumpism. Even after the former president's term concluded in early 2021, in mid-June 2015, Trump announced he was running to be President of the United States as a Republican in the 2016 election. His platform included promises to renegotiate trade deals with American interests in mind, reduce taxes and government regulations, repeal the Affordable Care Act established under outgoing President Barack Obama, defend Second Amendment gun rights, rebuild our depleted military, and curb illegal immigration, which he blamed for a variety of crimes. We are going to build a great border wall to stop illegal immigration, to stop the gangs and the violence, and to stop the drugs from pouring into our communities, Trump said, describing his signature immigration policy idea. In an unorthodox move, the candidate repeatedly refused to release his tax returns while they were being audited by the Internal Revenue Service. It was the first time a major party candidate hadn't released such information to the public before a presidential election since Richard Nixon in 1972. Initially considered a long-shot candidate in a crowded field that included experienced politicians like Jeb Bush, Ted Cruz, and Chris Christie, the famous businessman became the 2016 Republican nominee a little more than a year into his campaign. He faced Democrat Hillary Clinton in the general election, and defying polls and media projections, Trump pulled off a stunning victory on November 8, 2016, despite losing the popular vote to Clinton by almost 2.9 million votes. Trump's Electoral College win, 306 votes to Clinton's 232, sealed his triumph. After one of the most contentious presidential races in U.S. history, Trump's rise to the White House was considered a resounding rejection of establishment politics by blue-collar and working-class Americans. Trump soon became the leader of the United States, having never before held public office. Only former Presidents Zachary Taylor, Ulysses S. Grant, and Dwight D. Eisenhower were similarly inexperienced at the time of their elections. Though all had extensive military backgrounds, Trump's net worth was questioned over the course of his 2016 presidential run, and he courted controversy after repeatedly refusing to release his tax returns while they were being audited by the Internal Revenue Service. He did not release his tax returns during the election, and he has not to date. It was the first time a major party candidate had not released such information to the public before a presidential election since Richard Nixon in 1972. After Democrats regained control of the House with the 2018 elections, Trump again faced calls to release his tax returns. In April 2019, Congressman Richard Neal, chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, requested 6 years' worth of the president's personal and business tax returns from the IRS. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin rejected the request, as well as Neal's follow-up subpoena for the documents. In May, the New York State Assembly passed legislation that authorized tax officials to release the president's state returns to the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, the Senate Finance Committee, and the Joint Committee on Taxation for any specified and legitimate legislative purpose. With New York City serving as the home base for the Trump Organization, it was believed that the state returns would contain much of the same information as the president's federal returns. In September 2019, Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance Jr. subpoenaed the accounting firm Mazars USA for Trump's personal and corporate tax returns dating back to 2011, prompting a challenge from the president's lawyers. A Manhattan federal district judge dismissed Trump's lawsuit in October, though the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit agreed to temporarily delay enforcement of the subpoena while considering arguments in the case. A few days later, that same appeals court rejected Trump's bid to block another subpoena issued to Mazars USA, this one from the House Committee on Oversight and Reform. After the U.S. Supreme Court agreed to hear arguments over whether the president could block the disclosure of his financial information to congressional committees and the Manhattan District Attorney in December 2019, the cases were presented to the court the following May. In September 2020, the New York Times reported that Trump paid just $750 in federal income taxes in 2016 and 2017, and paid nothing in income taxes in 10 of the previous 15 years. A lawyer for the Trump Organization replied that most, if not all, of the facts appear to be inaccurate in the Times report. On January 20, 2017, Trump was sworn in as the 45th President of the United States by Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts. In his inaugural speech, Trump shared a populist, and at times bleak, message. What truly matters is not which party controls our government, but whether our government is controlled by the people, he said. January 20, 2017, will be remembered as the day the people became the rulers of this nation again. He described an America that had failed many of its citizens, on account of families trapped in poverty, an ineffective education system, crime, drugs, and gangs. This American carnage stops right here and stops right now, he said. In his term as president, Trump issued executive orders to make good on some of his campaign promises, as well as several orders aimed at deregulation. His administration saw the implementation of a number of controversial immigration policies, including a travel ban for several predominantly Muslim countries, the withdrawal of the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, scaled back financial regulations and environmental protections, and Trump's appointment of 3 Supreme Court justices. The president proposed a budget with increased spending for the military, Veterans Affairs, and national security, including building a wall on the border with Mexico, as well as major cuts to government agencies such as the Environmental Protection Agency and the National Endowment for the Arts. One of his most significant monetary accomplishments was signing a 2017 tax bill into law that lowered taxes for individuals and corporations. At various points during the Trump administration, the president and some members of his staff were embroiled in controversy or the subject of federal investigations. The Mueller investigation examined Russian interference into the 2016 election and the foreign countries' possible, but ultimately unfounded, ties to the Trump campaign. Trump was impeached twice for abuse of power and obstructing Congress in 2019 related to a campaign scandal involving Ukraine, then for incitement of insurrection in 2021 related to the January 6th attack on the Capitol. In both instances, the Senate voted against the president's removal from office. Elsewhere, citizens protested against Trump's policies and stance on major issues, including immigration, climate change, and women's rights. The Women's March, held the day after the president's inauguration, became the largest single-day protest in U.S. history, with more than 500,000 people participating in Washington, D.C., and hundreds of thousands more demonstrating across the country. After the U.S. Supreme Court agreed to hear arguments over whether the president could block the disclosure of his financial information to congressional committees and the Manhattan District Attorney in December 2019, the cases were presented to the court the following May. In September 2020, the New York Times reported that Trump paid just $750 in federal income taxes in 2016 and 2017, and paid nothing in income taxes in 10 of the previous 15 years. A lawyer for the Trump Organization replied that most, if not all, of the facts appear to be inaccurate in the Times report. On January 20th, 2017, Trump was sworn in as the 45th President of the United States by Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts. In his inaugural speech, Trump shared a populist, and at times bleak, message. What truly matters is not which party controls our government, but whether our government is controlled by the people, he said. January 20th, 2017, will be remembered as the day the people became the rulers of this nation again. He described an America that had failed many of its citizens on account of families trapped in poverty, an ineffective education system, crime, drugs, and gangs. This American carnage stops right here and stops right now, he said. In his term as president, Trump issued executive orders to make good on some of his campaign promises, as well as several orders aimed at deregulation. His administration saw the implementation of a number of controversial immigration policies, including a travel ban for several predominantly Muslim countries, the withdrawal of the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, scaled back financial regulations and environmental protections, and Trump's appointment of 3 Supreme Court justices. The president proposed a budget with increased spending for the military, veterans affairs, and national security, including building a wall on the border with Mexico, as well as major cuts to government agencies such as the Environmental Protection Agency and the National Endowment for the Arts. One of his most significant monetary accomplishments was signing a 2017 tax bill into law that lowered taxes for individuals and corporations. At various points during the Trump administration, the president and some members of his staff were embroiled in controversy or the subject of federal investigations. The Mueller investigation examined Russian interference into the 2016 election and the foreign countries' possible, but ultimately unfounded, ties to the Trump campaign. Trump was impeached twice for abuse of power and obstructing Congress in 2019 related to a campaign scandal involving Ukraine, then for incitement of insurrection in 2021 related to the January 6th attack on the Capitol. In both instances, the Senate voted against the president's removal from office. Elsewhere, citizens protested against Trump's policies and stance on major issues, including immigration, climate change, and women's rights. The Women's March, held the day after the president's inauguration, became the largest single-day protest in U.S. history, with more than 500,000 people participating in Washington, D.C., and hundreds of thousands more demonstrating across the country.